The reception music fades. The bride is found collapsed in her gown, blood pooling on the floor. Beside her, the groom's lifeless body. What began as a celebration of love ended in a horrific murder-suicide pact. Guests who came to witness vows of forever left in shock and terror. But what happened next shocked everyone. The tragedy unfolded in Savannah, Georgia, inside a historic waterfront and decorated with white roses and candlelit lanterns. The bride, Rachel Monroe, 27 years old, a beloved elementary school teacher known for her kindness. The groom, Ethan Wells, 29, a Marine veteran who had returned from service but carried invisible scars. The night was warm, filled with laughter, southern charm, and the sweet smell of magnolia. No one suspected that beneath the glowing lights and champagne toasts, a darker story was unfolding. Before we dive deeper, subscribe so you never miss a case. We post daily here on Behind the Crime. Rachel Monroe was the kind of woman who carried light wherever she went. At 27, she had carved out a life of meaning in Savannah, Georgia, teaching second grade at a local elementary school. Her students adored her, often drawing her crayon portraits and slipping notes into her desk that read, "Best teacher ever." Friends described her as gentle but strong, someone who remembered every birthday, every detail of a conversation, and who could make even the quietest person feel seen. Ethan Wells, 29, lived in a world that felt heavier. He grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. At 18, he enlisted in the Marines, determined to escape the cycle of poverty and prove himself. But after multiple tours overseas, he returned not with glory, but with wounds no one could easily see. He suffered nightmares, flashbacks, and bouts of anger that left him exhausted and ashamed. Their paths crossed in Savannah at a charity fundraiser. Rachel had volunteered to help set up the event. Ethan, invited by a friend, nearly skipped it. But fate had other plans. He noticed her first smiling as she poured sweet tea for an elderly couple. She noticed him next standing off to the side, quiet, his eyes searching. They struck up a conversation. One turned into 2. And soon, Rachel found herself drawn into Ethan's broken world, believing her love could help him heal. Their relationship moved quickly. They spent weekends strolling through Forsyth Park, Rachel pointing out every blooming azalea while Ethan listened, half present but comforted by her joy. She told friends she had found someone worth fighting for. He told his buddies Rachel was the only good thing in his life. But shadows lingered. Ethan drank too much. He had sudden mood swings, kind one moment, withdrawn the next. Rachel's sister noticed bruises on her arm once. Rachel brushed it off, saying they'd argued and she'd fallen. At school, co-workers noticed Rachel growing quieter, sometimes arriving late, looking like she hadn't slept. When asked, she'd smile and say, "I'm fine, just tired." Despite the strain, Ethan proposed one evening beneath the moss-draped trees of Savannah's historic district. Rachel said yes without hesitation. She believed in forever, in promises, in the idea that love could conquer anything. Their families had mixed feelings. Rachel's parents worried Ethan wasn't stable enough. Ethan's mother, however, insisted Rachel was exactly what her son needed. As the wedding approached, Rachel threw herself into planning. She picked out soft blush bridesmaids' dresses, a live jazz band, and a rustic reception at a waterfront inn. From the outside, it looked like a dream wedding. Yet those closest to the couple sensed an unease that no flower arrangements or photo shoots could hide. Ethan grew more restless. He purchased a handgun just weeks before the ceremony, telling Rachel's brother it was for protection. Rachel didn't mention it again, but her smile seemed thinner when the subject came up. The wedding day arrived bright and perfect. Rachel walked down the aisle radiant, lace gown shimmering in the sunlight. Ethan's gaze followed her, but his smile never reached his eyes. To the guests, it was a picture of happiness. But beneath the vows and applause, a storm was already gathering. And behind the perfect photographs, no one realized just how close they were to the unthinkable. The reception at the Savannah waterfront carried on with all the markings of a perfect southern wedding. Fairy lights glowed across the courtyard. Guests clinked champagne glasses while the jazz band played softly. Rachel laughed with her bridesmaids, her satin gown brushing against the wooden floor as she danced. Ethan, however, was different. He stayed near the bar, drinking steadily, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. A few guests noticed the tension. One bridesmaid recalled Rachel pulling Ethan aside, whispering to him urgently. He shook his head and muttered something she couldn't hear. His hand brushed against his jacket more than once, as though reassuring himself that something inside it was still there. By midnight the crowd thinned. The older relatives had left, while the younger guests lingered over last drinks. The music slowed. The air felt heavier. Rachel and Ethan slipped away from the reception, heading toward the bridal suite on the second floor. Inside, the room was quiet, lit only by the amber glow of a bedside lamp. Rachel, still in her gown, sat on the edge of the bed. Ethan paced the floor, his tuxedo jacket undone, sweat beading on his forehead. His words were slurred from the alcohol, his tone sharp. Witnesses later said they heard muffled voices, Rachel's soft, pleading tone, and Ethan's rising, frantic replies. Then came the sound that silenced the night. At 12:34 a.m., a single gunshot ripped through the walls. Conversations downstairs froze. Glasses slipped from hands and shattered. A scream followed, high-pitched, desperate, then another shot seconds later. Chaos erupted. Guests rushed toward the suite. Rachel's mother, still in her evening dress, pounded on the locked door, sobbing and screaming her daughter's name. The maid of honor pushed past, her hands shaking as she tried the handle. When it didn't budge, one of Ethan's cousins kicked it open with brute force. The sight inside was unforgettable. Rachel lay on the floor near the dresser, her veil tangled, her chest stained in red. Her eyes were closed, her body still. Ethan was beside her, collapsed against the bed, the gun still clutched in his hand. Blood pooled beneath them both, the white of Rachel's gown almost glowing under the lamp's dim light. The room filled with screams. Some guests fainted. Others dropped to their knees, sobbing uncontrollably. A groomsman vomited in the hallway, the sound echoing down the corridor. The band downstairs stopped playing. Silence fell over the inn, broken only by the wail of Rachel's mother and the sharp commands of a guest who dialed 911. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Officers cleared the hallway, pushing back the shocked crowd. Paramedics checked pulses but shook their heads. Rachel and Ethan were both gone. Detectives immediately secured the scene. They collected the handgun, Rachel's discarded bouquet, and a folded note found inside Ethan's jacket pocket. The note read, "We couldn't make it here, so we'll try somewhere else. Together." But even as the note hinted at a pact, doubt lingered in the air. Only Ethan's fingerprints were on the weapon. Rachel's hands were clean. The fairy tale wedding had collapsed into horror. Guests who had come to witness eternal love left traumatized, wrapped in shock and grief. And the question whispered through every corner of that inn. Was this truly a suicide pact, or had Rachel been trapped in the deadliest night of her life? Detectives from the Savannah Police Department arrived, determined to piece together what had gone so terribly wrong. The bridal suite was sealed, photographed from every angle. The handgun, still in Ethan's hand when first responders entered, was carefully collected and bagged. A single-page note in his jacket pocket became the center of immediate attention. It read, "We couldn't make it here, so we'll try somewhere else. Together." At first glance it sounded like a pact. But investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies. The handwriting analysis revealed the entire note matched Ethan's writing style. Forensic tests confirmed no fingerprints but his own on the paper. To detectives, it raised the first chilling possibility that Ethan alone had drafted the message, staging the idea of a shared decision. Gunshot residue testing provided another revelation. Ethan's hands tested positive. Rachel's came back clean. She had not fired the weapon. This pointed to one conclusion: Ethan pulled the trigger both times. Still, the investigation wasn't straightforward. Rachel's diary, retrieved from her apartment, contained unsettling passages. Weeks before the wedding she had written, "If Ethan ever goes, I'll go too. I can't picture life without him." Some detectives saw it as evidence she may have shared in his despair. Others believed it reflected emotional manipulation, that she had been conditioned into believing his survival was her responsibility. Friends and family interviews painted contrasting portraits. Rachel's co-workers described her as upbeat but increasingly tired in recent months. One remembered Rachel confiding that Ethan's moods frightened her. A bridesmaid recalled Rachel whispering, "I don't know if I'm making a mistake," just one day before the ceremony. Meanwhile, Ethan's Marine buddies admitted he had mentioned ending his life several times in the past, often while drinking, but they never imagined he would take someone else with him. Toxicology reports added another piece to the puzzle. Ethan's blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit, showing he had been heavily intoxicated. Rachel's results, however, were almost clean. She had barely touched alcohol that night, according to witnesses. This imbalance suggested she was not in the same mental state as Ethan when the shots were fired. Investigators chased down leads. There was a rumor Rachel had been seeing someone else, but her phone records showed no evidence of another relationship. Another theory suggested Ethan had financial trouble, but bank statements revealed steady military benefits and no major debt. The more the detectives dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't about money or betrayal, it was about Ethan's unraveling state of mind. Yet, one line of inquiry complicated everything. On Rachel's phone, a text message to her best friend the night before the wedding read, "He's scaring me. I don't know if I should go through with this." Those words carried the weight of dread. Did she sense danger? Did she feel trapped, unable to walk away hours before she was set to walk down the aisle? By the end of their investigation, police concluded the tragedy was a murder-suicide. Ethan shot Rachel before turning the gun on himself. But the lingering evidence, her diary, her text messages, the note in his jacket, left room for a haunting question. Was Rachel a willing partner in a pact, or the final victim of Ethan's spiraling despair? The Savannah Police Department eventually closed the case with an official ruling of murder-suicide. The evidence was clear enough for the paperwork. Ethan Wells had pulled the trigger twice, once ending Rachel Monroe's life, and once ending his own. The gun, the note, the residue on his hands all aligned with that conclusion. But for the families left behind, the ruling didn't bring peace. Instead, it split them. Rachel's family refused to believe she had any part in a pact. Her mother, speaking through tears at a press conference, declared, "My daughter wanted to live. She wanted a future. He stole that from her." To them, Rachel's diary entry about not living without Ethan was the result of months of emotional pressure, a young woman writing from fear, not choice. Ethan's family, however, clung to a different version. His sister claimed Rachel knew Ethan's struggles and loved him so deeply that she couldn't imagine being apart. They were inseparable, she said, and Rachel was just as lost without him as he was without her. The funerals only deepened the divide. Rachel's service was held in a crowded church, her white coffin surrounded by flowers and photographs of her smiling with students, friends, and family. Her colleagues brought handmade cards from her classroom, each one scrawled with a child's message, "We love you, Miss Monroe." Tears filled the sanctuary as her father whispered in his eulogy, "She had her whole life ahead of her." Ethan's funeral was quieter, held 2 days later in Jacksonville. Some relatives chose not to attend, unwilling to face the shame of what he had done. Those who came mourned a man they believed had been broken long before he walked down the aisle. His mother wept openly, repeating, "This isn't who he was. The war changed him." But outside the circle of grief, the public's judgment was harsher. Local headlines called Ethan a groom-turned-killer. Online forums debated whether Rachel was complicit or coerced. To some, the diary and the note hinted at a pact. To others, the clean toxicology and the desperate text message showed a woman caught in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Years later, the questions haven't fully faded. Rachel's friends still wonder if they could have intervened when she expressed doubt. Ethan's fellow Marines replay conversations with him, haunted by signs they now recognize as warnings. What makes this case linger is the uncertainty. On the surface, it's a story of a wedding turned into a crime scene. But underneath lies the complexity of love entangled with despair, of promises twisted into something fatal. Did Rachel willingly walk into that bridal suite knowing what Ethan planned? Or did she find herself locked inside with no way out? The truth perhaps died with them. What is undeniable is that a night meant to symbolize eternal love ended with eternal silence. The fairy tale wedding became a cautionary tale, a reminder that behind perfect photographs and staged smiles, there can be shadows no one sees until it's too late. And the most chilling part? The truth may still be out there. Experts who reviewed the case point to Ethan Wells' long history of untreated trauma. His years in the Marines left him with symptoms of PTSD, nightmares, hypervigilance, and a growing sense of hopelessness. Psychologists explain that untreated PTSD often evolves into depression, isolation, and dangerous coping mechanisms like alcohol abuse. Ethan's heavy drinking on the night of the wedding likely lowered his inhibitions and amplified his despair. But there's another layer: control and dependency. Intimate partner homicide often stems not from sudden rage but from a belief that the partner cannot exist apart. Ethan's note, "We'll try somewhere else. Together," suggests he saw Rachel not as a separate person with her own future but as an extension of himself. Experts call this possessive desperation, the toxic conviction that if one life ends, the other must end too. Rachel's writings complicate the picture. Her diary entries, "If Ethan goes, I'll go too," may look like willingness, but psychologists warn this can reflect trauma bonding. Over time, victims can internalize their abuser's despair and adopt their worldview. They start to believe survival without the other person is impossible, even when that belief puts them in danger. The imbalance on the night of the crime speaks volumes. Ethan was intoxicated, agitated, and armed. Rachel was sober, dressed for a future she had hoped to begin. To experts, this indicates coercion more than choice. Her whispered words to a bridesmaid, "I don't know if I'm making a mistake," and her text the night before, "He's scaring me," reveal fear, not agreement. Ultimately, psychologists see the tragedy as a lethal mix of untreated trauma, alcohol, and emotional dependency. Ethan may have convinced himself that death together was the only option. Rachel, bound by love, fear, and the weight of promises, became his final victim. The story of Rachel Monroe and Ethan Wells is more than just a wedding gone wrong. It's a chilling reminder of how love, when twisted by despair and control, can become deadly. A day that was supposed to mark a new beginning ended with finality. Two lives, joined in vows of forever, silence before dawn. For Rachel's family, the loss is unbearable. For Ethan's, the shame is heavy. And for everyone else, the questions linger. Was it truly a pact? Or was Rachel trapped in her groom's unraveling mind? What do you think? Did Rachel choose this fate, or was she the final victim of Ethan's desperation? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you want more chilling stories that peel back the darkness hiding behind everyday lives, subscribe now. You won't want to miss it.